Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aaron, and you're tuning in to our first modern Magic the Gathering deck tech here on the channel. For the purposes of saving me time, I'll be showcasing a brew I made with the help of tappedout.net. It is a great website I've been using for a couple of years now. That I've used to catalog, share, and play test my deck lists. And the website also gives you the chance to shop around for cards online, either for your paper cards through TCG Player and Card Kingdom, or for the online copies of it for your Magic the Gathering Online library at Card Hoarder. But let's get to the deck tech, shall we? The main idea of this deck is to completely break a relatively new legendary creature from Guilds of Ravnica, Lazav the Multifarious. A legendary shapeshifter, Lazav is a 1/3 that surveils once when he enters the battlefield, so you get to look at the top card of your library and choose whether or not to put it back or to put it into your graveyard. So that's cute, but we're not here for that. We're here for his second ability to pay X mana. You can transform Lazav the Multifarious at instant speed into a copy of target creature with converted mana cost X that is in your graveyard. Lazav keeps his name, the fact that he's legendary, and also keeps that ability, so you can use this pay X mana to turn him into something else multiple times in a turn at instant speed. So this is a really sweet trick. But ultimately, I landed on Aether Vial because being able to put creatures into play at instant speed and for no mana is worth every penny. Getting creatures in for no mana frees up our mana to use Lazav's X ability as soon as we need to, which really comes in handy as he'll certainly beta removal spells if you have no mana up. Having said that, this deck is certainly not budget, clocking in at just over $735, and nearly $400 of that is coming from just like 9 cards. So yeah, this deck is definitely not budget, but that $735 doesn't come close to the $2,000 price tag of something like Top 8 Jund or Abzan, or the $1,300 price tag of Grixis and Boros twin decks. And the fact that I'm Canadian, it's probably closer to like $800 or $850 Canadian. This deck costs a little more than Mono Red Burn, and is right up there with Red-Green Tron and Affinity in terms of price. This deck operates as like a weird cross between a Dredge deck and a Bogles deck. We run resilient threats such as Lotleth Troll, the Amonkhet Gods, Bantu the Glorified, and Kefnet the Mindful. We also run a little slippery Bogle of our own. We got Invisible Stalker and Strangle Rootgeist, Kitchen Finks, and Glen Elendra Archmage. And if you can turn Lazav into any one of these creatures, this deck goes off the rails, being able to string together a Lotless Troll, discarding all your creature cards in your hand to make him bigger, and then turn into an Invisible Stalker in response to a removal spell, or turn him into Kitchen Finks, etc. But before all that, we need to mill ourselves fiercely in order for Lazav to be a threat. We have 19 cards in the deck that can put creature cards into our graveyard for Lazav in the form of Cryptbreaker, Hedron Crab, Lotless Troll, and Splinter Fright. Now, definitely the top contenders of this deck in terms of milling ourselves is Cryptbreaker, Hedron Crab, and Lotleth Troll. Hedron Crab is definitely the safest option. Just hit your lands, mill yourself for 3. Cryptbreaker and Lotleth Troll, because they are discard effects, are very much double-edged swords. You put that creature into your graveyard, okay, well now you're down a card in your hand. And especially with Cryptbreaker, if Cryptbreaker is a source of card draw, we only have 5 cards in our deck that draw us cards in the form of Cryptbreaker and Kefnet the Mindful. And especially with Cryptbreaker, if it dies before you can use its second ability to tap 3 zombies, you control to draw a card and lose 1 life, you're just down in cards. You would be pretty boned, pun intended. Most modern Aether Vial decks are mono white or white-green Selesnya, so that they can run Leonin Arbiter and Ghost Quarter, which is a crazy way of punishing your opponents, taking away their land base during the early turns, and maybe even just shutting them out of the game, because you won't be able to pay that 2 mana to search for that basic land. And although we're not quite that spicy, we do run Ghost Quarter and Field of Ruin, and we also run the Dredge staple Life from the Loam. We also run Ramanap Excavator, so we can cycle through these land destruction lands in and out of the battlefield. And with Hedron Crab out there, like Hedron Crab, Ramanap Excavator, and a Ghost Quarter just means every turn we can take away one of our opponent's lands. Eventually, they will run out of basics. That Ghost Quarter becomes a strip mine. Now, Lazav is not the only one with tricks in this deck. So let's look at another 2 converted mana cost copy creature in the form of Phantasmal Image. For 1 in a blue, you get a 0/0 illusion creature that enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, not just our own, except it is an illusion in addition to its other types, and it has, whenever this creature is targeted by a spell or ability, sacrifice it. Lazav turns into legendary copies of creatures that are in your graveyard. Phantasmal Image can play around with the creatures that you would have to run out. So if you have Stranglerootgeist and Kitchen Finks in the battlefield, Phantasmal Image is insane. You have it enter the battlefield as a copy of the Kitchen Finks, or Glenelundra Archmage, whatever. A creature would persist. When Phantasmal Image dies, let's say you have it block something, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it. So it's a 0/0 with -1/-1, whatever. You have it enter the battlefield as the copy of Stranglerootgeist. So it'll be a 1/0. So it will die as a state-based effect, but it will die with Undying. So it will come back with a +1/+1 counter on it. It will come back again, and then you get to choose what it turns into again. So you can have it come in as a Kitchen Finks again. Gain 2 more life, and now you have a 4/3 Kitchen Finks. You will gain a lot of life, and in the form of Glenelundra Archmage, that has a built-in kill switch in it. You get to sacrifice it to counter a non-creature spell. This deck is a very proactive deck, with exactly half the deck being creatures to work with Aether Vial and Lazav the Multifarious. But we do have some proactive spells in order to stop our opponents from doing their own game plan, and Mausoleum Secrets is perhaps one of the best ways of making sure that we can answer our opponents when we need to. For 1 and a black, you get an instant that lets you search your library for a black card with converted mana cost equal or less than the number of creature cards that are in your graveyard, and then you put that card into your hand. So Diabolic Tutor is a terrible card. It's a sorcery, and it costs 4 mana, so you can't interact with your opponent in this way, and it costs so much mana that you're very unlikely to be able to cast that spell to save you. You're only really casting a tutor spell in order to win the game outright or to save yourself from what your opponent is doing, and 4 mana makes it very hard. Look, if you need to counter a board wipe next turn, Diabolic Tutor doesn't work with Glenelundra Archmage. That's 9 mana to counter something. Beseech the Queen costs 3 black mana, so that's pretty tough. But it is like a fringe legacy card, and it sees a lot of play in Commander. But Mausoleum Secrets costs 1 and a black, and it's an instant. You can respond to a threat or removal spell being cast. That's brutal. They happen to kill Lazav with a board wipe or removal spell. Cool. Go and get a second copy and vial it in at the end step. You need a card draw spell? All right, cool. Go ahead and get Crypt Breaker. Or you need a removal spell? All right, go ahead and get Assassin's Trophy, arguably the best removal spell in the format, in any format. Our sideboard, although we only have 2 Mausoleum Secrets in the deck, our sideboard is definitely tailored towards Mausoleum Secrets. We also have 2 more in the sideboard just to make our game 2 a bit more consistent in terms of finding our answers, finding our Assassin's Trophies for that Tron player, etc. And speaking of which, I'm sure you can get what this deck is doing by now. And those of you who are savvy modern players will have a good understanding of what this deck in a competitive meta would have a lot of trouble with. I personally don't think that this rogue homebrew can stand up to top 8 decks like Eldrazi Taxes, Mardu Pyromancer, Hollow One, or Death's Shadow. But whatever. That's what homebrew rogue decks are for. 99% of the time, you should expect your opponents to bring in Graveyard Hate and Artifact Removal against you in Game 2. That's just the fact of life. Surgical Extraction is an amazing card. That's why we run it. Along with a plethora of Reclamation Sages, Tormod's Crypts, Stony Silences, Relic of Progenitus, and Ancient Grudges. They're gonna seriously disrupt Lazav and Aether Vial. And with that knowledge, you can happily sideboard all 4 of them out to make room for your own sideboard cards to deal with what your opponent is doing. As I said before, 2 more Mausoleum Secrets come in to add consistency to our deck, and 3 Surgical Extractions run beautifully with Assassin's Trophy and Glenelundra Archmage. to guarantee that you can destroy or counter your opponent's most important card, have it hit the graveyard, and then exile all copies of them from their graveyard, hand, and library for the rest of the game. Not to mention, it gives you perfect information of what's in their hand and what other cards they're running in the deck. You get to just look at all their cards in their deck. You can write them all down if you want. You can, in a tournament, you're fully allowed to just write down a list of all cards that they run in their deck. Besides that, Crypt Incursion and Scavenging Ooze are final ways of dealing with problematic graveyard strategies such as an opponent's Dredge deck or a Goryo's Vengeance deck. Both of these require 3 mana in order to pull off, so if they have the nut draw of a turn 2 Goryo's Vengeance kill, really Surgical Extraction is the only way to combat that by exiling it in response to Emrakul, Gristlebrand, Borborygmos Enraged, Obsidat, whatever, hitting the graveyard in response. If it is anything but Emrakul, you're just going to be mulliganing until you find Surgical Extraction or a way to cast Assassin's Trophy by turn 2. And if it is Emmy Award-winning Aeon's Torn, you just hope that you either get Surgical Extraction or they just don't have a way to kill you after hitting you for 15 and nuking your whole board. These graveyard hate cards also come in. Crypt Incursion gains you life. Scavenging Ooze gains you life. And also boosts itself if it exiles a creature card. So you can bring this in against an aggressive deck, such as Eldrazi, Burn, and Zoo, Death Shadow, stuff like that. Pretty much anything that's more of an aggressive deck, just to pad your life total and make sure that you're able to get in there for some damage or profitably block. Tireless Tracker is a way for us to draw cards without having to discard to Cryptbreaker or bounce lands to Kefnet. And finally, we are running a similar combo to what Lazav likes to do. Soulflayer and Chromanticore. So Soulflayer is a 6-mana, 4/4 black demon. Doesn't sound that good, but it has Delve. So you can exile cards in your graveyard to pay for 1 generic mana of his converted mana cost. And it gains the keywords of creatures that you delved away for it. So if by some miracle your opponent isn't playing Rest in Peace or Leyline of the Void, making it so you never have a graveyard for the rest of the game, adding Soulflayer and Chromanticore can be a way to jerk around your opponent's pinpoint graveyard hate. Rest in Peace exiles due to state-based actions. You can't respond to the fact that that card is being exiled. There's no way to really interact with that. But cards like Relic of Progenitus, Tormod's Crypt, and Surgical Extraction use the stack. They have effects that go onto the stack that you can interrupt. Soulflayer delves away creatures as a cost to cast the card before Soulflayer even hits the stack, so that makes it a state-based effect and thus cannot be responded to. So yeah, we're already running creatures with relevant keywords such as Hexproof, Haste, Trample, Indestructible Menace, and Flying, but Chromanticore puts that way over the top. He has 5 total keywords on him. So if you can exile a Chromanticore, a Buntu the Glorified, an Invisible Stalker, and a Strangleroot Geist, you can get a 4/4 flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, lifelink, menace, indestructible, hexproof, and hasty demon for just 2 black mana. Oh, and Lazav can become a Chromanticore. And hey, look, Lotleth Troll. So you put 1/1 counters onto Lazav, and you turn him into a Chromanticore. And that's the deck, everyone. I hope you liked it, and leave a comment below with what crazy brews you've came up with recently. And tell me what you'd like to see more of in the future. My name is Aaron, and have an awesome day.